Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So let's just jump straight in here with an update on Voyage of the Unity, the Kickstarter. So we're currently at 407,000 made here in terms of backers, up to 2,325, meaning we have met a very recent stretch goal. So 5 new location cards for 400,000 has been unlocked. The next one here, upgraded covers and the world map. I think we're going to hit that. It might take a while because things have slowed down a little bit because there's not really been that many big stretch goals, but this is a pretty nice one here, which they do detail in their new update. So they go over what the last thing we unlocked was. The next stretch goal is, of course, foil spot gloss being added to the booklet, the covers, and an upgrade to the map material, which is to cloth. So this will now become a cloth map, and it will be at least 23 by 16 inches. So that's cool. This goal here, the one that we're about to meet, I guess, eventually, this is the first one that feels like a proper stretch goal, where it's something that's being added in for basically everyone, all physical tiers at the very least. So that's fine. I think they've not done a good job about communicating like the specifics of like, oh, these are the cards, but also it is new art that is coming into the books, as if like, what we don't even know how much new art was planned versus like more new art is now planned. There's a bit of like, huh? What was the idea about that? They have a Reddit AMA coming up, which kind of feels a bit weird given that they have a comment section here where they're mostly answering all questions, but anyway, AMA, it is what it is. That's happening next Tuesday if you are at all interested. There are apparently more stretch goals coming. I think they should get them up sooner rather than later. I think things have been a little slow. They've been a bit slow getting to things over the last few days. But yeah, they definitely need to add on at least one more stretch goal just to highlight what it is. But I sort of understand the idea that they probably, if they want those stretch goals to be met, have to be somewhat careful about the money amounts coming up, because it is going to be a while to reach like 70,000 extra basically. So how much further do they go after this? How much of a giant increases do they expect on like the final day? That sort of thing. But I think people would want at least one or two more stretch goals, just that feel like they have a little bit more impact, because the first 5 stretch goals were kind of where this one was just, you now have the possibility to buy this other thing. It's not really an addition to anything, it's just another option you now have. And then the cards and the art was always a little bit like, come on, really? Next thing I want to cover is just the whole situation with this campaign and the lack of a hardcover option. Now, in the comments, the way I would interpret what they've said is that I think they're leaning towards there won't be an option at all or a stretch goal for a hardcover, but they've not outright just said that in the Kickstarter comments. They've answered a few people, including myself, just saying stuff like, you know, we prefer the booklets for this reason, we understand the value of a hardcover, the slipcase is kind of meant to be the hardcover, as if like a hardcover can't also go in a slipcase. Don't ask me what their logic is there. But the whole idea of, they've not just outright said, no, there will be no stretch goal of a hardcover, or any other reason that, you know, just kind of shuts down the question that keeps getting asked. Because that's the thing. People keep asking them about the hardcover situation, and they don't seem to have an answer, really. You can see here's a post from a day ago, which they, notably, they've responded to like basically everything else, but they haven't actually responded to this question again. They don't have anything about the hardcover in their FAQ, in terms of like, here's a common answer that keeps coming up. Why have they ignored this? Because clearly it's a bit of a controversial kind of topic here. But people have found that a few months ago, when they first put up the kind of preview Kickstarter page 4 months ago, this is the official Beetle and Grimm account, someone asked them, hey, any chance that the booklets will be combined into a hardcover? And they say that, oh yeah, it's hard slipcase, type thing. It'll look like a hardcover, their usual response. But then, this is the more significant thing that is here, but for some reason they're refusing to say on the Kickstarter. As is always the case with licensed products, there are always rules and limits as to what we can produce. Important clarification question here, because again, the question isn't quite answered. As a stretch goal, maybe, or are you not allowed basically to produce it at all? We can only print the adventure as a set of booklets. And then they again really want to convince you that the slipcase is the same thing, when no. If people want the hardcover, they want the hardcover. Your slipcase situation is not really going to help them. So if that's the case, that resolves the issue. That's it. Like, they can't, whatever license they have, that's slightly different, I guess, than Magpie's, where they can do everything it seems like that Magpie can do except a hardcover. It gets a little bit hard to kind of understand, like, without knowing and deeply understanding what their licensing agreements really are. But it is weird that, like, okay, we're adding like coins and all this extra stuff on like Magpie did, but the line is drawn at hardcover for whatever reason. I'm still a little bit confused, but hey, if that's the case, that's a line that you can use. Why aren't you using it on the Kickstarter to bring this topic to a close? Because you can't really argue too much with that. But they're not saying it. So has something changed? Is a hardcover actually an option? And that's why they're kind of not fully committing to no hardcover on the Kickstarter. I don't really know. Because there's a few other little bits and pieces here with this. Where am I going here? It's FAQ. Where you can see something like, say, this. They're still working at like the retail version of this, which I guess would be like, say, post Kickstarter in like a year or two after the Kickstarter. What's it going to be like buying these Unity booklets? Like, the digital one makes sense, Drive-Thru-RPG will have it, but the physical version of these things are, again, like, is it going to be done through Beetle and Grimm? Or once they run out of their specific version of the set, does it revert back over to Magpie, and Magpie now have that content? Because they're not just going to let a whole giant chunk of content like this just be unavailable physically after a certain amount of time. And is that maybe what's happening here? Magpie will be able to maybe do the hardcover at some point down the line to match up with the other books, but Beetle and Grimm have to do booklets, but with extra stuff. And I wish they'd almost just say that so people could make their decision. But for money reasons, I guess maybe that's part of why they're making the decision in the way that they actually are. Still, I think the main takeaway here is just that on the topic of the hardcover, I wish they would just be a little bit more clear. If you can't do it, just tell people. Don't leave it kind of hanging where you've kind of half answered the question, especially when you were able to say this a bunch of months ago, talking about, basically their licensing agreement, quote unquote. Why aren't you saying this now to bring the matter to a close? I'm kind of confused on this. But anyway, that's that. We'll see how it does as it goes forward. But yeah, the lack of a hardcover is a frustration. Next piece of news is a slight update to the whole Legend of Aang The Last Airbender situation, where, of course, the recent news has been the movie is delayed into October 2026. And then just before that, we also got the news that apparently Studio Mir is also doing animation work on the movie also. Now, that piece of news, the Mir news, immediately prompted the idea of, like, that Mir announcement from themselves didn't mention Flying Bark at all. Like, it wasn't, the announcement wasn't, we're coming on board to assist Flying Bark, we look forward to working with Flying Bark. It was just, no, we're working on the movie. Which was weird because we had apparently heard from CinemaCon that animation production was done on the movie, but now Studio Mir are coming on board and they're hiring a lot of people, like ramping up. What's happening here? Like, it was very, very odd, and obviously people went crazy with the speculation. The update here is that, it's a slight clarification, but an important one. Studio Mir is only working alongside Flying Bark animation. Flying Bark is still heavily involved. So I think a lot of people had the very negative viewpoint on this piece of news, which was that Flying Bark messed up the animation. Now Studio Mir are coming in to save the entire project. And while maybe it is still a little bit of a drafting Studio Mir in as a bit of an emergency studio, it might not be as kind of terrible in terms of drama of a production as some people are maybe making it out to be. I still would say there's definitely a ring of we need another animation studio in to get this thing done because it's maybe taking too long, but is it extreme production problems or just a relatively normal thing of like, we need a bit of help type of situation? Is the 8-month delay that we got entirely due to, we just need all this time to get it done on time? How much of that is just them choosing a better time of the year to put the movie out? It's probably a bit of everything, honestly. There's probably some slight production issues. Are they as big as we think? Probably not. Flying Bark is still involved. And in that sense, it will be interesting to know, like, if we ever get the details on, like, just how much stuff is Studio Mir coming in to help with. Is it just specific cuts of animation or what? We just don't know. Finally, and just before we go into this, I'll just put up the slight spoiler warning because it is an early review for the City of Echoes novel. So this is the first Avatar Legends novel, the Jin novel. I just put up the slight spoiler warning here because I know some people are pretty weird about spoilers. I don't consider what's in this to be like spoilers or anything like that, but just before I put it up on screen, I'll just be like, hey, go into the next section of the video at your own risk. But anyway, very brief early review here for City of Echoes. I almost hesitate to call it a review necessarily because it doesn't really have much opinion. Apparently it is a nuanced exploration of darker themes set in the world of the popular Avatar universe. Okay. A 16-year-old refugee in a Chinese-inspired fantasy world delves into the mysteries of her new home in order to save a friend. Jin and her grandfather Gong Gong live in Ba Sing Se's lower ring, struggling to get by with delivery jobs. Gong Gong, once an expert calligrapher, thought Jin enough to earn a scholarship to a literature academy, but now he's often mentally absent and confused. They're part of a torrent of refugees whose family and villages were destroyed by the Fire Nation. Despite this, Ba Sing Se's brutal enforcers, the Dai Li, insist there is no war. Still grieving her parents, Jin dreams of a more comfortable life for Gong Gong and her best friend Susu's family. After Susu is forced to take a servant job in the upper ring, risking a life of abuse by a wealthy employer, Jin begins accepting hazardous delivery jobs from the underground resistance, hoping to help Susu. Although this series opener takes place during the timeline of Avatar The Last Airbender series and contains cameos by characters from that world, it's well developed enough to succeed as a standalone. So there's finally some opinion coming back into it. It's viewed as being well developed and it works on its own, where I guess what's being said here is that the reference, I guess, to the sort of like 213 to 220 kind of arc from Avatar at the end of book 2, you don't have to be constantly watching that while reading the book, or this works on its own, which kind of makes sense because Jin is ultimately in such a small part of the series in that sense. Lin, so the writer, delicately balances themes of inequality, societal control, insularity, and the impact of war with Jin's resolve to help Susu, her burgeoning earthbending skills, and the struggle for a better world. Jin's quest for a love like her parents leads to a realistic, supportive, slow burn romance. So pretty cool and interesting here. So confirmation that Jin is an earthbender. That's very interesting. Obviously, there's a few details like we already knew from the description already here, but stuff like, the name of her grandfather, some of the details kind of exactly surrounding that. What exactly is happening with Susu in terms of taking a job in the upper ring, which I think was basically implied, but like, now you get the idea of like, this is what she's trying to stop. More about the underground resistance, which we don't know more about. And that's kind of what I take from this from an opinion point of view, is just that it seems like some of that stuff, the conspiracy within the walls, we're going to tackle that in a kind of deeper, broader way than City of Walls and Secrets and like Lao Guy basically did, where we touched on it for those 2 episodes, but there's more overall there in terms of this will be the effect of that on more normal people rather than some of the more famous people kind of within the world, that whole idea. Will be interesting to see which cameos specifically we do get here overall. And then that there is some sort of a romance in this. I'm still a little bit up in the air on the exact kind of continuity for this with regards to, like, is it before / after her appearance in the show, or is it before, during, and after? I guess we'll have to wait until the book comes out to get the full scope of that. But seems good so far from this very, very early take that doesn't really say too much about the book. But, you know, nice to get something here, given that we're probably still, I'm going to guess, at least 2, maybe 3 weeks away from getting preview pages for this. And that is assuming some sort of an outlet gets like an excerpt like we've got before. I think they'll do it. I think they made a big enough deal out of the announcement of this book. It's the first in the series. Given what they've done for all the novels so far, I can't see them not doing it here. And giving it that kind of typical preview page situation. Because obviously we'll still get the more standard previews that always come out. It's just, will there be an outlet that gets that kind of preview chapter situation? But yeah, I'm excited for this. And I think a book like this becomes all the more important this year now because we've had the delays. It was kind of a nice extra, you know, a couple of months leading into the marketing campaign, I guess, for the movie. Now that's a kind of year off further into the future. This is one of the prime pieces of content for the year as we start the kind of end of the year, which will be all novel focused. We're going to have this, we're going to have Awakening of Roku Book 2, and Light It Up later on in the year as well, whenever we hear about that. And so far so good. It looks like the Avatar Legends series is going to be starting off quite well. And I'm excited to read this. A different type of Avatar novel should be exciting. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on everything here. Voyage of the Unity here. What are your thoughts on stretch goals so far? The fact that they are giving... They're allowed to explain exactly what is no hardcover a few months beforehand on Reddit, but apparently they can't say the same thing now on the Kickstarter. What are your thoughts there? And yeah, any thoughts on, I suppose, clarification about the whole Studio Mir coming on board situation? Communication still isn't super great, but I guess it's nice to get a little detail like this. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.